What if the reason you feel stuck isn't because life is against you, but because you're still gripping something your soul is ready to release? There are moments when you look at your life and everything seems like it should be fine. You've survived worse. You've made it through days when your chest was a battlefield, when your smile was a mask, and your silence was louder than any scream. But still, something feels off. A quiet ache, a dull emptiness, a weight you can't quite name. Maybe it's the way you keep showing up for people who wouldn't even flinch if you disappeared. Maybe it's how your heart still breaks for someone who walked away as if you were nothing. Or maybe it's just this feeling that no matter how hard you try, you're never quite enough. If any of that speaks to something inside you, you're not alone. This video is for you, not for everyone. It's not a lecture. It's not a guidebook. It's a mirror. And somewhere between the pain and the pause, you might find the breath you didn't know you were holding. The moment you let go, life begins to change. And if that resonates even a little, take a moment to breathe. Let yourself land here. And if something in this finds its way to the part of you that's tired of pretending, subscribe, like, and stay with me. Because we're about to go deep, not to get lost, but to finally come home. You see, letting go isn't a grand decision. It's not some dramatic scene where you shout to the sky, burn old letters, or block every name that once made your heart race. It's quieter than that. Sometimes, letting go sounds like silence, the moment you stop defending yourself in conversations where you're not even being heard. Sometimes, it looks like stillness the moment you don't send the message, even though your fingers ache to type, even though your chest is begging for closure that will never come. And sometimes, letting go feels like grief, not just for the person or the relationship, but for the version of you that kept hoping, kept trying, kept bleeding into spaces that never held you back. We think letting go is a decision, but it's not. It's a moment. A moment when you realize the pain of holding on is heavier than the fear of moving forward. And the most tragic part, most people don't even notice when it happens. You'll be in the middle of brushing your teeth or standing in line at a coffee shop, and you'll feel it, the soft shift. The part of you that once begged for their love just goes quiet. The narrative starts to break. You no longer see them as the one who got away. You begin to see them as the one who couldn't stay. And that tiny shift, it changes everything. But it's not easy. No one tells you how hard it is to let go of something you never really had. No one prepares you for how empty you feel when you stop chasing a love you created in your head. Because that's the thing. Sometimes, the hardest person to let go of is the one you imagined they could be, not the one they were. Not the one who left you wondering what you did wrong or why you weren't enough, but the one you believed they might become if they just healed, or tried harder, or loved you the way you loved them. You built a dream around a person who was never dreaming with you. And maybe you stayed, not because they made you feel alive, but because you were afraid of what your life might look like without the fantasy. But listen closely. That wasn't love. That was survival. That was your inner child trying to rewrite a story that hurt too much to relive. That was you trying to fix a wound by clinging to the person who caused it. You kept handing them the same key that kept locking you out of yourself, and you kept calling it hope. But hope shouldn't feel like waiting to be chosen. It shouldn't feel like shrinking to fit into someone else's life. It shouldn't feel like begging someone to see your worth when you've been standing in front of them this whole time. Letting go isn't about forgetting them. It's about remembering you, who you were before the silence got so loud. Before the smile became a shield, before you mistook being tolerated for being loved. Letting go is the moment you choose yourself, even if your voice shakes, even if your knees buckle, even if your heart whispers. But what if they come back? Because you know deep down that if they really wanted to love you, they already would have. And that's not bitterness, that's clarity. That's peace disguised as pain. You start to notice it in strange places. In the way the morning light hits your face and you don't rush to check your phone. In the stillness after a long day when you realize you didn't think about them as much. In the way you truly laugh, and don't immediately feel guilty for feeling joy without them. This is what healing looks like. Not a straight line, not a triumphant drum roll, but these quiet, almost invisible shifts. You don't even realize it at first, because it's not loud like heartbreak. Healing is subtle. It doesn't announce itself. It just starts showing up in your breath, in your boundaries, in the softness returning to your voice. And it often begins when you're not even trying to heal. You're just tired of your own patterns, tired of explaining your pain, tired of waiting for someone else to give you permission to move on. So you stop. You stop trying to fix what was never yours to fix. You stop trying to prove that you're worthy. You stop negotiating your needs just to avoid being alone. And somehow, in that stillness, something sacred begins. Your heart, broken as it is, starts whispering truths you had forgotten. That you are not unlovable. That you are not too much. That you are not the reason they couldn't stay. You were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. And the moment you stop fighting for a version of love that doesn't love you back is the moment something deeper opens. You begin to come back to yourself. And let me tell you something. There is nothing more powerful than a person who returns to themselves. Because once you do, once you taste the clarity of your own presence, you can no longer be manipulated by crumbs. You stop settling for the almosts. You stop fantasizing about potential. You start living here, now, in the truth of who you are, not in the illusion of who you thought you had to be to earn love. That's what Carl Jung meant when he said, "The moment you accept yourself as you are, you will begin to change." It's a paradox, isn't it? The very moment you stop chasing healing like a finish line, when you stop trying to fix your sadness and simply hold it, that's when things begin to shift. That's when your inner world, the part of you that's been screaming to be heard beneath all the noise, finally exhales. Letting go doesn't mean the memories disappear. It means they stop owning you. It means your worth no longer sits in someone else's hands. And yes, some days will still ache. You'll hear a song and it'll pull you back. You'll pass a place and feel the weight return. But grief is not a regression. It's just a wave. And now, you know how to breathe through it. You don't drown, you rise. Because when you let go, you make space. Space for real love, the kind that sees you in your mess, your joy, your softness, your anger, the kind that doesn't ask you to shrink. But even more importantly, you make space for yourself. You stop being a background character in your own life. You stop abandoning yourself just to be accepted. And for the first time in a long time, you feel whole. Not because someone filled the emptiness, but because you stopped running from it. There's a part of you that probably still wonders, was it ever real? Did they mean any of it? The way they looked at you like you were magic. The promises, the soft touches, the words that felt like home. And I want to tell you something you might not want to hear, but need to. Yes, it was real. But not in the way you thought. It was real in how you felt it, in how deeply you showed up, in how vulnerably you loved. That was real. That was yours. And you should never regret a love that came from your truth. Even if it wasn't met, even if they couldn't hold it, even if they left you wondering if any of it mattered, it did. Because love doesn't lose its meaning just because it wasn't returned. You didn't lose anything by loving them, they lost something by not receiving it. But that's no longer your burden to carry. It's time to stop analyzing the past like it's a puzzle you're supposed to solve. They didn't leave because you were too much. They left because they weren't enough, not for your light, not for your depth, not for the kind of love that holds its own reflection and doesn't flinch. You were never broken. You were just surrounded by people who couldn't see you clearly because they were still blind to themselves. So now comes the choice. The moment where the past still lingers like a shadow close, familiar, whispering, just one more time. But you know what that path leads to? You've walked it before, haven't you? You've tried again. You've made excuses. You've hoped they'd change. You've twisted yourself into shapes just to stay inside their story. But you're not a character in someone else's redemption arc. You're the author of your own. And this moment right now is the turning point. You can feel it, not in your mind, but in your body. That quiet knowing in your chest. That soft ache in your belly. That trembling in your hands that says, I don't want to keep hurting like this. That's your soul talking. Not in words, but in sensations. And when you learn to listen to that, to trust the language of your own body, you'll never need someone else to validate your truth again. Because the truth doesn't shout, it whispers. And you've been drowning it out with noise, with people, with distractions, with numbing, with performing, with chasing, but you don't have to run anymore. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to explain why you're walking away. Peace doesn't require permission. Sometimes closure isn't a conversation. It's a decision. To breathe, to release, to rise. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that doesn't hurt anymore just so they can feel okay about how they treated you. You are not obligated to stay in pain just because it makes your story easier for someone else to digest. You can choose your own ending. And maybe, just maybe, it's not an ending at all. Maybe it's the beginning. There will be a day, and it might come sooner than you think when you wake up and you don't immediately think of them. Not out of anger, not out of pain, but simply because you're full of your own life again. The spaces they use to occupy your thoughts, your dreams, your loneliness, they start to fill with something else, something quieter, something truer, your own voice, your own laughter echoing in an empty kitchen, your own breath becoming enough. It won't feel like a celebration at first. It might even feel like guilt, because for so long, sadness was your companion. Grief became your comfort. And now, here you are, catching a moment of stillness without the ache. And part of you won't know what to do with that. You've been surviving so long, you forgot what it means to just be. But slowly, gently, you begin to remember. You remember that joy doesn't need a reason. That you can sit in a cafe alone and the silence won't scream at you anymore. That your worth isn't something someone else gets to decide. You start dressing for yourself, playing your music loud again, taking the long way home just because the sunset is too beautiful to rush. And on one of those days, you'll look in the mirror and see something unfamiliar, yet familiar. Your eyes won't look so tired. Your skin won't feel so heavy. There will be softness there, a light, a quiet knowing, and you'll realize you made it. Not all the way, but far enough to know you're not who you used to be. You're no longer waiting to be saved, because you learn how to rescue yourself. You stopped reaching for people who couldn't reach back. You stopped confusing love with survival. You stopped begging to be chosen. And in that sacred reclamation, something else bloomed. Your power, not the loud, flashy kind, but the kind that comes from choosing yourself over and over again, even when it's lonely, even when it's hard, even when your heart still aches for the past. That kind of power is unshakable. And the ones who couldn't love you before, they'll feel it. They'll notice the shift, the silence, the distance. And maybe one day they'll look back and realize what they lost. But by then, you won't be waiting. You'll be too busy living, too busy loving yourself in all the ways they never could. Because the moment you let go, you didn't lose them. You found you. And there is nothing more sacred than that. The most beautiful part of your healing won't be loud. It won't come with applause. No one will hand you a medal for surviving what tried to break you. It'll happen in a grocery store, when you pick up your favorite snack without thinking of the time they mocked your taste. It'll be in the middle of a conversation when you laugh, full and unfiltered, and realize you're not scanning the room to see if someone disapproves. It'll be when you choose to leave a text unanswered, not to punish anyone, but because peace no longer asks for your performance. And on the hardest days, when the tears still find you, you won't collapse. You'll hold yourself. You'll whisper the same words you once begged to hear from someone else. I've got you. Because now you do. And maybe for the first time in your life, that's enough. But don't rush the healing. Don't treat it like a deadline. Let yourself be where you are. Angry, numb, relieved, hopeful. All of it belongs. There is no wrong way to reclaim yourself. There's just the next honest step. And sometimes, that step looks like finally grieving what never truly existed. The potential, the future you painted in your mind, the version of them that only lived in your hope. That's the heartbreak no one talks about, the one where you mourn the person they never were, but you needed them to be. And yet, through that mourning, something wild and sacred is reborn. You start to trust your own gut again. You start to feel safe not because someone else is holding you, but because you stopped abandoning yourself. You stop silencing your needs to keep others comfortable. You stop shrinking your light to avoid being left. Because now, you know, anyone who asks you to become less is afraid of more. And you were always more. More than their projections, more than their excuses, more than the pain they handed you and called love. You are allowed to be seen in your joy, in your fury, in your softness, in your depth. And you are allowed to walk away from anything that forces you to hide those parts. That is not selfish, that is sacred. Because letting go is not about closing the door with bitterness. It's about realizing the door was never locked. You were always free to leave. You just had to remember your own strength. And now that you have, there's no going back. The life you longed for, it's not behind them. It's not waiting in the past, wrapped in nostalgia and what-ifs. It's ahead. In the people who will meet you where you are, in the spaces where your truth doesn't feel like too much, in the mornings when you wake up and finally feel light. And maybe it starts today. Maybe as you sit here, listening, breathing, you finally realize you're not broken. You're just unfolding. It's strange how the moment you stop trying to be okay for everyone else is the same moment you begin to feel okay for real. Because healing isn't about pretending you're fine. It's about standing in your truth, trembling, tear-stained, but honest. And maybe, for the first time, you're no longer ashamed of how much you feel. You're no longer apologizing for being the one who cares deeply, who holds space, who remembers small things, who aches when others turn away. Because now you see your sensitivity was never the problem. It was your compass, your strength. And those who made you feel weak for loving too hard, they never understood how rare that love was. You were never too much. They were just never enough to receive it. And maybe, just maybe, they were sent into your life not to stay but to wake you up, to show you the places you still needed to heal, to remind you of the boundaries you forgot you were allowed to have, to return you to the one person you kept leaving behind you. Because that's the part no one tells you. Sometimes the heartbreak is sacred, not because the pain is holy, but because of what it reveals. It shows you where your wounds live. It shows you the stories you've been repeating. It shows you who you become when you're afraid of being alone. And if you're brave enough to look, it shows you how to come home. Not to a place, not to another person, but to yourself. And the you that you're returning to, she's always been there. She's the one who stood in the mirror, holding back tears, trying to make sense of the silence. She's the one who loved anyway, even when it hurt, even when it cost her everything. She's the one who's been waiting patiently for you to choose her. So if you're wondering when it gets better, when the light comes back, when the ache finally fades, maybe it's now. Not because everything's fixed, not because the past stops mattering, but because you matter more than the past now. Because you're choosing to stop bleeding for people who never offered you a bandage. Because you're no longer fighting to stay in places that keep wounding you. And that choice, that sacred decision to stop abandoning yourself, that's what changes everything. You become the kind of person who no longer settles for almost. You start showing up fully, and walking away from anyone who only brings half of themselves. You love deeply, but you love yourself deeper. You forgive, but you never forget who you had to become to survive. And most of all, you let go of the fantasy, of the pain, of the idea that love has to hurt. And life, it begins to open, not perfectly, not instantly, but with every breath, every boundary, every brave step into your own wholeness, it begins. Not because you've finally been chosen, but because you finally chose yourself, and now you begin to live. Not the way you used to, performing happiness for others, twisting your joy into shapes that made people stay, but fully, softly, boldly. You wake up and feel the air against your skin, not the weight on your chest. You move through your day without narrating your worth based on who texts you back. You stop waiting to be rescued because you know now you are not broken. You were never broken. You were just aching to be seen in a world that taught you to disappear, but not anymore. Now, you know the cost of silence, the cost of self-abandonment, the cost of making yourself small just to be loved, and you refuse to pay it again. You've tasted your own freedom, and it's intoxicating. Now, when someone asks you to dim your light, you smile and walk away. Not because you're bitter, but because you finally understand you can't stay where love asks you to betray yourself. And you no longer crave the kind of love that makes you question your worth, because now you carry it. In your breath, in your choices, in your calm refusal to beg for space in someone else's world. This is what it means to be free, to look in the mirror and recognize the person staring back, not for what she survived, but for how she kept showing up, even when it was hard, even when it felt like everything inside her was falling apart. She never gave up. She just needed time, time to unravel, time to weep, time to let go. And now, here she is, standing tall, soft, and whole. You see, the moment you let go not of the person, but of the illusion, you begin to return to yourself. And when you return, you remember you were always enough, even when they didn't choose you, even when they left without looking back, even when you questioned your own worth because someone else couldn't hold your depth. You were always enough, and you still are. So take a breath, place your hand on your chest, feel that. That's not just a heartbeat. That's life, yours, unfolding, beating, waiting to be lived. The kind of life that doesn't beg, the kind of love that doesn't hurt, the kind of peace that doesn't leave, because it's yours now, and no one gets to take it away. This is your becoming. This is your moment. Not the one where they come back, but the one where you do.